We are now back quickly on the GSMC Chip Shout Football Podcast to continue on from our discussion in segment 1, now including the other wide receivers that still need a resolution found in their contract negotiations on top of Jamar Chase. Now we're bringing in CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Aiyuk because there is less than 3 weeks left for the start of the regular season, and still there's really no solid evidence or any solid, reports or anything that we've heard so far that any resolution is coming for Brandon Aiyuk, CeeDee Lamb, or Jamar Chase. Yeah, you might point out some recent reports by Schefter or Ian Rappaport or any of these guys, but again, I feel like it's more of the same so far with all the reports that we're hearing, and I don't know what to believe anymore, especially with this Brandon Aiyuk situation being, sort of closer to this because I'm a Steelers fan, and is he going to get traded? It doesn't look like it one day, and then another day, the offer from the 49ers quite isn't there, what he expects, then it reignites the fire for the Steelers, and it's just been all a mess. And if I think that's a mess, you look at the situation with the Cowboys and CeeDee Lamb, and that one might be even more of a mystery to solve. And then Jamar Chase as well, jumping in on that. But we're going to go through all three of these guys, go through the course of events that have happened over the last few weeks, and then just give our predictions on what's going to happen with each of these contract situations and when we could expect these solutions to come eventually, maybe eventually, or not at all. So we're going to start off with Brandon Aiyuk here, talking about Aiyuk because he's been holding in recently, and currently I feel like he's the one being talked about the most. It seems like every other day, like I mentioned, there's always something about being close to the Niners. He's not quite there yet. He doesn't like their offer too much. Maybe he's thinking of a trade. A lot has been said about Brandon Aiyuk recently. It's pretty much down to being traded to the Steelers or re-signing, extending with the 49ers. And contract talks have been going on all off season, and reports say that they were close at one point before the influx of other deals came in for other wide receivers, obviously just shooting up the price. And then Brandon Aiyuk, before signing, apparently, he took a step back, reevaluated everything, and thought he could get more money now because the market had just exploded out of nowhere with deals to like 10 different receivers in a span of like a couple of months. So, it is smart by Brandon Aiyuk. It's beneficial for him, obviously, to do this, to get more money out of it, especially coming off of the year that he did. He has a lot of leverage in this situation, obviously, with how the trade talks have also broken down. He has requested a trade, unlike the other two wide receivers, so that, again, gives them a bit more leverage. He shot down the trade offer from the Patriots. They were willing to give him a lot of money, and it seemed like they had a trade down with the 49ers. Same thing with the Browns. It seemed like they had a contract for Brandon Aiyuk and a trade suitable for the 49ers. But again, Brandon Aiyuk and that power to be willing to accept that contract and get things moving, he declined that as well. So there is only two options now, like I said, Steelers or staying on the 49ers. And there's a lot of uncertainty, obviously, with the different reports, and also Brandon Aiyuk, I think, has been the most active of the three, posting cryptic messages, not showing up to voluntary workouts, and then showing up to training camp and not participating in practice. He's been on podcasts talking about it and things like that, so you don't really know what he's thinking, quite honestly. You don't know when, where, or what's going to be the deciding factor with all of this. And one thing that I will point out, one of the reports that I feel like could hold a little bit more weight comes from Adam Schefter, that he said that this week could be critical because the 49ers are getting to a point where they want to get this resolved. They're tired of just putting this off, waiting for Brandon Aiyuk to make a decision. They've offered him another contract that they think is more suitable, more appropriate to his worth. So they want to find a resolution sooner rather than later to at least move on and know who is going to be available to them. So I guess we'll just keep an eye out for that. Hopefully it happens no later than this weekend because we move into next week and then there's only about 15 days before the season kicks off. So that needs to be resolved. And then moving on to another receiver, CeeDee Lamb. He's in a full holdout as of right now. And Brandon Aiyuk had a great year last year, but CeeDee Lamb had one of the best receiving seasons last year in Cowboys franchise history. So right away, that gives him a lot of leverage. He's putting up numbers up there with some of the best receivers that the Cowboys have ever had. And the fact that he broke some records, set some franchise records, it's hard to not give that contract to that guy that had one of the best seasons ever in your franchise's history. But like I said, they're dealing with a full holdout. He hasn't been present at all throughout the entire offseason. So not at voluntary workouts, not at training camp at all, not even just showing up. He's just not been there. And unlike Brandon Aiyuk as well, we haven't heard much from CeeDee Lamb at all. They brought it up to him at one of his camps, but again, he just shot it down, saying that he's not going to talk about it. He's only going to take questions about the kids at his football camp. So he's been kept pretty quiet about it. He's kept to himself and just waiting for things to play out as they should. It feels like he believes that he's done enough, that he doesn't need to talk, because he arguably was one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver last year in the NFL. And a lot of their success was predicated on how he performed. And you want to look at Dak and the situation that they have dealing with his contract extension as well. You could look at Dak in the season that he had. Maybe you argue that they should get him done first, but CeeDee could make a great argument that Dak wouldn't have had that season without, CeeDee performing to that level. So it's funny because Dak could say the same thing. CeeDee's not having that type of season if I'm not his quarterback. So that symbiotic relationship is another thing that makes this entire situation for the Dallas Cowboys that much more difficult. And really deciding who you want to extend, because I truly don't believe now that with less than 3 weeks to go to the season that they're going to get both of them done. I feel like they're going to have to choose, because you're asking for two contracts at top of the market value. And the fact that it's still in a period where the Cowboys are like, yeah, we're optimistic about it. CeeDee's not saying anything. Dak also is saying they're in a good spot right now, but talks are continuing to go on. And reports contradicting that, saying that they're not really close at all. I don't think there's enough time to get to a point where both sides are happy in both contract negotiations. So to me, it seems like they're going to have to pick. And I really believe that they're going to go with CeeDee, but I'm going to hold off on why in just a few seconds. After I just go through Ja'Marr Chase's situation just briefly, after I just went over it in the first segment, he has 2 years left. Cincinnati, again, don't have to trade him, or don't have to extend him, I should say. They're not going to trade him. But he has 2 years left on his contract overall, unlike Brandon and unlike CeeDee Lamb. They're on their last year of their deal. Zach Taylor been kept pretty quiet about what is going on with Ja'Marr Chase, what he feels are Ja'Marr Chase's feelings, whether or not he believes he's going to hold in or hold out. That's another layer of this that has been added on. Like I mentioned from Chad Ochocinco, that could this hold in be turned into a holdout once the regular season starts? That would be worst case scenario, obviously, for the Bengals. And it's just in a weird spot because he is supposed to make very little money for the type of receiver that he is. And he still has that fifth-year option. So really, the Bengals don't feel a deadline right now to get it done because he is under contract to be on that team. And I don't think they're finding him right now because he is there, obviously. But once the regular season starts, maybe once they start finding him, if he does hold out, they probably feel confident that he'll show up and he'll actually play. But that's still a couple weeks away. We don't know. And that's the scary part about it. You just don't know where Ja'Marr Chase's head is at right now in regards to what he's actually going to do. So in terms of my predictions, what I think is ultimately going to happen with each of these guys, in terms of solutions and what actually is going to happen, I think the Cowboys will decide to go with CeeDee Lamb and give him a new deal, but not Dak. At least I think it's more likely that CeeDee gets a contract before the start of the regular season than Dak does before the start of the regular season. Just because CeeDee Lamb's not been there. He's not there at all. There's a difference between working out on your own, staying in shape, and then being in football shape, right? Being in training camp, having a helmet on all day, having those pads on every other day in practice. He could be doing a fantastic job of staying in shape, but again, it's not enough for me to believe that he's going to be in football shape once he comes back right up against the deadline of the regular season. That's why I believe they're going to prioritize CeeDee Lamb a little bit more. I think he'll be the first one to get it done. And then with Dak, the way that he has approached this, it seems like he is content with moving on from the Cowboys. They might not be okay with that, but Dak's not making a big deal about it, and CeeDee Lamb, more so than not, is making more of a big deal about it than Dak. So I feel like you have to address the guy that isn't even in the building before you address the quarterback, which seems backwards, obviously, because Dak is the quarterback, and he did play a great year last year, but to me it seems like CeeDee right now seems to be a little bit more of the priority because he just isn't there, and you need him very much there to even have a chance. If they don't have him there, it seems like he's the most willing to hold out. And even if you do extend Dak and CeeDee's not there, you're not going to win many games. Honestly, that's the truth. If you don't have CeeDee Lamb there, I can't name another receiver for the Cowboys other than Jalen Tolbert and Brandon Cooks, and those guys are not number one receivers. So that's why I feel CeeDee will get a deal first before Dak. And then you look at Jamar Chase. I feel like he'll play in the regular season. I don't really buy that he'll hold out, just because I think it has to do a lot with the money. Yeah, he's supposed to be paid very little this upcoming 2024 year, but that's why I sort of believe he's going to show up just for the regular season, right, if that makes sense. There's no sense in practicing this offseason if you know that you're just going to make very little money anyway during the regular season. So to me, I feel like he's going to show up. He might be a little bit angry about it, a little bit, just whiny about it, just making a fuss about it, not being happy, not giving good answers in the media. But I feel like he's going to show up, be upset about it, for a lack of better terms, just acting like childish in a way. But he'll show up because I believe next year when he plays on that fifth-year option, he's going to get closer to market price, and that way you could have him there for training camp because he will be making more money, more guaranteed money in that fifth year. So Jamar, I don't think is going to hold out. I don't really buy too much into that. And then lastly, Brandon Aiyuk. I feel like Brandon's going to get traded. I feel like Brandon would get traded because I don't see this really coming to any terms anytime soon. I feel like these reports of him having a meeting again on Monday with the 49ers, getting closer to an extension, I feel like I've heard that at least twice or three times already. So the fact that now we are cutting it close to the start of the regular season, they have a big game in the first week against the New York Jets, and the fact that, again, he might not be in football shape right away, you have to get all your eggs in order, or all your ducks in order. I think that's the saying, but regardless, you have to get everything in order before you start game planning to that game against the New York Jets, receiving them in San Francisco. It's going to be a big game, so you need to know who you have available, and if you keep dragging this on, I feel like the 49ers are getting closer to a point where they just are over it to an extent, and I feel like they'd reduce the asking price and just feel like getting over this is worth more than trying to beg and insist Brandon Aiyuk to just take the contract if he really doesn't want to take it again, right? It seems like he wants to be paid accordingly. So he does hold a lot of power, but at the same time, he is contractually obligated to be there. But again, I feel like he would hold out, and that really does no good to the 49ers at all. So I believe that they'll cave, trade him, just because they have bigger goals set out for 2024. They can't have this situation in their mind, clogging up their mind, because they're trying to win a Super Bowl. And if you have players reluctant to be there, then they're not buying in fully, and you can't have that because there's a lot of pressure on the 49ers to win a Super Bowl, a lot of pressure on Kyle Shanahan as well. So those are my predictions on how these situations will end up for each receiver. Leave your guys' thoughts on whether you agree with me or whether or not you think I was wrong with one of my predictions. Leave your guys' comments using the Super Chat feature, of course, in today's show. But regardless of that, we're going to move on to our next topic, a pretty open discussion that we're going to have on some comments Tom Brady made about the rookie quarterbacks being ill-prepared compared to past years when he was a quarterback, and also legendary coach Bill Parcells also touching on this situation in a different sort of way, approaching it from a mental side of things for rookie quarterbacks. I'll get into all the details on what those two guys said after this break. We'll be right back.